Hello, everybody, and welcome to Starting Small Music. I'm Justin McCormick, and you're about to hear a conversation with an artist, musician, and music industry professional on their journey and how they got to where they are today. At Starting Small, we like to take you on a journey uncovering the untold stories of your favorite songs and artists. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Just keep a smile on your face and it'll be okay. Try not to be bitter, you gotta do it either way. Keep a smile on your face and it'll be okay. So when life throws a jab, you gotta duck out of the way.
How you doing today, Kyle?
I'm doing good. How about you, Justin?
I'm doing awesome. So, getting right into your story, you grew up in Kentucky. What was your childhood like?
Pretty typical, just kind of middle class upbringing. I feel like my mom was a teacher, dad was a forest ranger, so we kind of grew up in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. Small town. Just grew up playing sports. Honestly, music wasn't a huge part of my life early on. Neither of my parents were really big into music. My mom was like Kenny G and blanking on the name, but like some of the contemporary adult Christian at the time. And my dad just listened to country radio, so that was kind of my start of music, but didn't really get a passion for it until I had an older brother who introduced me to some heavier stuff. I was getting ready for a soccer tournament one day when I was in like 6th grade and asked for some pump up music, and he gave me 3 cassettes. One was Deepest Purple, it's a greatest hits, Metallica's The Black Album, and then Black Sabbath's We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll.
Wow.
And Metallica and Sabbath both, but mostly that Sabbath record just absolutely changed my life, and had a passion for music and wanted to play and learn about it. And so that was kind of the beginning of my music journey.
For sure. Now, did your brother play music, or was he just a big music listener?
He did. He played guitar, and I idolized my brother, wanted to be just like him. So I wanted to play guitar, and I'd sneak into his room, and he had a red SG, and I'd sneak in there and play it every chance I could. I was terrible. And I had a bunch of friends like from that area. There's a lot of like strong music heritage, and there were a lot of like really talented musicians that I grew up with. So I wanted to, play music, and I thought I wanted to do guitar or drums. But then all my friends convinced me to play bass because there were no bass players in our town pretty much. So like, if you play bass, you'll always have a band.
Right.
So that's what I did. I picked up bass, and, Black Sabbath is a really good example of some just awesome musicianship on a bass when you're talking about rock music. So
For sure.
yeah, I did that. And yeah, like they said, I always had a band. Everybody needed a bass player. Everybody played guitar. There were quite a few drummers, but there was like one other kid in my high school that played bass.
Yeah, as soon as you said that your brother was the one that got you into music, I was like, okay, that's why he's playing bass. Everyone who has a older brother that plays guitar, it seems like they convince them that they need a bass player.
Yeah, I used to joke about that, especially like I never got into the pop punk scene, but as it was coming around, just joked about like every bass player was just like somebody's little brother. Like they needed a bass player, so like, oh, your little brother's not doing anything, he can play 4 strings.
Now, would you say like the Metallica records and stuff like that were some of the first bands that you really resonated with then too? Like you continued listening to them?
Yeah, still to this day, like I've always been a huge Metallica fan. I mean, I feel like it'd be hard to find somebody who's into heavier rock and metal and stuff that like Metallica isn't a big part of their life. But yeah, I mean, Sabbath has always been kind of the bigger influence. Just Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler, they're just have always been incredible, and what the sounds they create with what they have. The fact that like Tony Iommi can be so heavy without fingertips, and using, when he first started, he was using banjo strings partially on his guitar.
Oh, wow.
and just because they didn't make all the different gauges back then. So the like big, thick, heavy sounds with a guitar and his, lack of fingers and the higher gauge strings is just incredible.
A band from that era that I don't think gets enough kind of attention is Judas Priest. I mean, their music back in the day, especially the early stuff, is just insane.
Yeah. I never got too much into them. So when my brother was introducing me to that kind of stuff, one of his best friends had an older brother. I feel like that's probably how most of us discover music, is through an older sibling. But and they were into a lot of the heavier stuff at the time. So this would have been early to mid 90s. And so I was just discovering Sabbath and Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and all that stuff. And they were into Megadeth and Sepultura and bands like that. And I never got into the 80s and early 90s metal so much. Just the tone of it never spoke to me after my music awakening with some of the like bigger, more riff rock bands and with the warmer tones and stuff like that. So bands like Megadeth never really spoke to me. Pantera would be like the exception. Like they had that like quintessential 80s metal sound, and but they're just incredible.
For sure. Now, it was in high school that you started kind of playing in bands?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. I played, I guess I picked up bass in 7th or 8th grade. I had a friend of mine who was a really great guitar player. He had a bass and a bass amp that he loaned me for a while, and until he sold it to somebody else, and I had to buy my own gear. So yeah, just playing like in that area, there's no places to play really. So it's a lot of just like jamming in people's sheds and stuff like that. So yeah, doing that, playing in church, playing with friends. And then, yeah, kind of sophomore year of high school, had a band, 2 guitar players, drummer, and myself, and where we actually were writing originals and had a pretty extensive list of covers we were doing.
Yeah. Now, coming out of high school, you didn't actually first intend to go into music, right? You spent some time studying engineering at University of Kentucky.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, I just came from what I feel like just a very normal background. So both my parents college educated. And to me, it just felt like that's what you do. You graduate high school, you go get a degree, you get a 9 to 5. I never thought too much about how records were made. Mm-hmm. I loved listening to music, but I never thought about engineers or musicians. And my musical talent has always been pretty mediocre. Especially I learned that when I moved to Nashville and saw how amazing some of these men and women are around here. So yeah, I just never thought about it, and I was not a credit reader. Wasn't looking at who produced and engineered and who wrote the songs. That just never crossed my mind. I never knew somebody, so I just never thought of that as a job. So yeah, I liked AutoCAD, and I wanted to build bridges, I thought. So I went to UK and studied civil engineering. And in high school, like I did a lot of AutoCAD and like really nerdy with it. I was competing in AutoCAD competitions and doing well. And was like, yeah, this makes sense. Like my life goal for a while was like move to East Tennessee, just because I love the South and I love the mountains and stuff like that. Wanted to get out of Kentucky. For no other reason than just to feel independent. But yeah, and it kind of fit into that. And I was going to build bridges. I'm still to this day, I love bridges, and the engineering behind them is almost as magical as like some of the stuff that happens in a studio. But yeah, I get to UK. I was always a really strong math student, but all of a sudden started struggling in it. So my first semester, I failed chemistry, which I never, in Kentucky, you either take chemistry or physics. Mm-hmm. So I had no experience with chemistry. I took physics because I'm like, I'm going to build bridges. I need physics.
Yeah.
So it's out of my depths with chemistry, and it was a class meant to weed out engineers and pre-med students. So it's just a little trickier. And I struggled in math too. It's like, what am I doing? Why is school all of a sudden so hard? And I just kind of reevaluated. It's like, maybe this is not where I'm supposed to be. So I knew of Middle Tennessee State in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, outside of Nashville.
Mhm.
I've known of that because we had a family friend who went there and did the recording industry program. And he wasn't working in the industry anymore, but I knew of the program. That was the only program I knew of. So I kind of looked into it, and it was a thing where, I could go for in-state tuition because they have this thing called Academic Common Market, where they don't offer a program in your state, you can go out of state for in-state tuition.
Oh yeah.
So it was affordable. I think nowadays so many recording schools have popped up that be an impossible program to take advantage of. But yeah, so I was able to go there. It's already an affordable school anyway. But being able to pay state tuition, and I think they focus on transfer students and older students. So they had a lot of resources on their website about transfer credits and stuff like that. So I actually spent 2 years at UK, but just taking classes that I knew would transfer.
Yeah.
Just I wasn't quite ready to leave, and I had a girlfriend at the time. It was serious, and so I was trying to just delay the inevitable with that. But yeah, then moved to Tennessee. Started at MTSU. Everything was easy again. Everything just kind of clicked, like excelling in math. Coincidentally, the very first class I had, some guy I knew from UK just like walked in the door. I'm like, holy crap, I know that guy. So yeah, it was just a good fit, and just loved it down there, and
Yeah.
it was my calling.
It's so funny too, because I mean, you still are doing engineering, your engineering sessions, just not that the engineering you thought you'd be doing.
Yeah. I always joke just because I had a glimpse into that, and I feel like audio engineering, while it's difficult and technical, it's like not quite as difficult as civil and mechanical engineering. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of funny. It's a downgrade as far as like difficulty in brains, I think, which is maybe why I excelled. Civil engineering was just too smart for me.
Now, what did those first years in Nashville look like for you, like networking and kind of getting on the scene?
Man, nothing really to brag about. I'm not a good networker. My just MO has always been kind of keep your head down and work hard, and people will know about you for that reason. So, I interned 2 semesters at a studio here in town, and then about halfway through the second semester, I made the decision to do a second internship because I saw a potential opening at this place, and I wanted to move over to like a bigger studio like Blackbird and work on rock projects and stuff like that. But I saw a potential opening, so I stuck it out. And about halfway through that second semester, I got hired on. One of the engineers there was married to a Russian woman, and so they like went to Russia for 2 months at the end of the year and needed somebody to fill in. And I had, dedicated my MO while I was there as an intern was to not to knock him out of a job, but to be able to fill in for him. So my goal was to be able to replace the assistant. So just like having that like goal to shoot for of like anything he can do, I can do. Like he's got more experience and a better ear, and not saying I was better than him, but just like to me that was like a job security thing. Like if he's sick one day or he goes to Russia for 2 months, like, oh, everything's okay because our intern can actually do this. So I didn't, like I said, didn't do a whole lot of networking. I feel like a lot of the kids that I graduated with aren't really in the industry anymore. There's a handful of them in my class. One guy's an engineer producer, one of my best friends to this day. But a lot of the guys just kind of went. I mean, it's tough. I had to suffer through a lot with engineering, especially. You just got to suffer through a lot. It's not a very glorious job path to take. When you think about entertainment and music and all the cool stuff involved with making music, I know that we do have celebrity engineers more so. It seems more intriguing, but it's pretty tough. You're in the shadows.
Now,
Go ahead.
fast forward to 2012. One of my favorite records you worked on early in your catalog is Dierks Bentley's Home album.
Mm.
Do you have any memories of working on that?
Um, Not Home in particular. I always loved working with Dierks, and that was actually the very first major label thing I ever worked on was one of Dierks' songs. It was Free and Easy. It was like the last song off his like second or third record.
Yeah.
And it was a song we cut at the studio that I was a house engineer at, called Station West. And it was like a afterthought for the record. Kind of, they needed one more song. I don't know the circumstances, and they brought his live band in there. And so how they would do his records is they had this band, just some of the greatest musicians in town, and we'd go over to Ocean Way and Studio A, this big beautiful church, and with just amazing gear and console and stuff like that. So this was just kind of last minute, I guess, low budget. Had his live band on it. So just the very first major label thing I ever tracked, and it ended up becoming a single. Not because of anything I did, and it was just a great song. I thought so when we were recording it, and then we ended up having to kind of go back and polish it up a little bit. We added some of the studio guys on it, replaced some of the live guys parts just to tighten things up a little bit. And I remember, we kept the drums, but the drummer we used on those records was a guy named Steve Brewster, and he's got a fairly distinctive kick drum sound. I think a lot of people could pick out his kick drum. So I had to go back in. This was before Trigger existed. So I used a program called Sound Replacer, which was notoriously buggy and inaccurate, and having to go in and kind of replace. That was like a gateway to a lot of editing stuff, because I had kind of figured out that program, but I had to replace every single kick drum with a sample of his kick drum that we had, to kind of make it consistent. And it was one thing that I think the engineer on it just like didn't want to fool with the hassle and thought it was going to take a while. And I managed to knock it out pretty quick. And because I got done, he's like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, check it out." And he's like, "Okay, yeah, that's good." I guess expecting it to be a little sloppy. So yeah, and I do remember a little bit of Home. I think that was the last Dierks record I ever worked on. He was kind of trying out new producers here and there. And so the records I did with him was a production team with a guy named Brett Beavers,
Right.
Was the producer, and then Luke Wooten, who's the owner of Station West Engineering, and he was associate producer on that stuff, I think is his title.
Yeah.
They always did such great work with him, but he was just experimenting with some stuff, and so I think that was kind of our last record with him, and it was a great one, I thought.
Now, you mentioned Station West. You're now, in 2016, you became the chief engineer there. And man, when I recorded there, I just felt like I was in church, just because, I mean, how special a place that is. What is it like to be able to work in such a cool atmosphere like that every day?
Awesome. I don't take it for granted. I love that studio. I work in a lot of other studios. So just in general, just one of the great things about Nashville is our recording music scene. The fact that we have so many talented musicians that are so easily accessible.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's your favorite record, and that's the drummer on that record. I can get that guy for you. Or, you like that bass player, I can get her for you. That kind of thing. The accessibility of that. Same thing with studios. We have so many just amazing studios that thoughtful in their design, have great gear. Most of the studios keep up with it pretty good, like keep up with repairs, so you're not having to deal with broken gear or cross patching on a console to get a working channel strip kind of thing. So yeah, I love it. And that studio especially has its particular quirks that I've learned to embrace over the years, and in some ways prefer over other studios. And there's some other studios I prefer, but yeah, it's been a while. I've kind of stopped working in project studios and home studios. My old MO was just like, you never say no. But it just got to the point where, being so spoiled working in some of the, Blackbird and Ocean Way and Sound Emporium and Station West and just some of the best studios in town and in the world. So you go into project studios, somebody else's project studio, not that it's not a good studio, but you're very limited by gear. You're very limited by what they do on a daily basis. And I find that I can't kind of do what I want to do and get the sounds I want to get. So I really do value those like professional studios, and it's scary as so many of them are shutting down in Nashville. Just what the future is going to be. I think we'll always have them.
Yeah.
But it is just a little disconcerting. And because I think a lot of people don't understand their value, and they're so expensive. Some of them, they're just inaccessible. And I get young musicians and independent artists standpoint, not being able to afford that stuff. And sometimes you can get by without a professional studio, especially if you have like a producer or engineer who knows what they're doing. But
Yeah,
there's a lot you can do there that you can't do in a project studio.
for sure. Now, as someone who's running sessions all day, all long, what is something you see a lot of new artists make a mistake that, like when they're first coming in the studio?
Man, a lot of things probably. Focusing on the wrong things is a big deal, especially like in the mix. My philosophy, my background in the studio is significantly in the publishing side of things. So, I've done a lot of records, but what's different about doing publisher demos is the speed in which we do things, and then also like that's one of the first layers of production, first levels of production. Because especially when I first started out in like 06, DAWs and the equipment wasn't that accessible to everyone. Not every songwriter had a DAW on their laptop and a portable microphone and knew how to use it. So the songs came in much more raw. And so in a 3-hour session, we would record 5 songs, and that's these musicians. For people who don't know how the Nashville studio scene works, is like these musicians have never heard these songs before in their life. And so the songwriter comes in, they play them on their guitar, they've got a cassette or a CD they'll play, and it's terrible recording. Sometimes they have like lead lick ideas in there, but it's really raw. And these 5 musicians, typically 5, 6, 7 musicians, will go in, and by the second pass it's almost perfect. Usually first, second, third pass, and then we're usually it's like 2 passes, and then we're like fixing small sections here and there and going to over second acoustic, second electric, adding percussion kind of thing. So the advantage of that is I'm learning from so many different producers, essentially all these songwriters trying to bring their vision to life and explain this. And in Nashville especially, there's people talk, it all starts with a song. I think that's one of the PRO's mottos and stuff, but it's very song focused and lyric focused. So my production style is about really serving the artist and serving the song, and kind of coming up with this like guiding principle to get us to the end point. And just like letting that dictate, instead of like getting too caught up in the minutia of just like, is this the right thing to do? Is this the right instrument? Can we put that type of instrument on a country record? So going back to new artists and stuff, I feel like they focus just kind of on the wrong things. A lot of times they're just focused on their voice and their voice only.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not focused on how the arrangement is serving the song, how it's building, how it's helping their vocal, going against what they're doing, you know, whatever you're trying to achieve at the moment. And
Yeah.
I work with a lot of young singers, and one of the things I'm always going for, and I'm always just like, I feel like a broken record, is I'm just going for feeling and emotion. And a lot of producers do that, but young artists and singers, they're in there. It's a pretty high pressure situation. But they're just focused on hitting the note.
Yeah.
And that's important. My hope is that you're beyond that. You're skillful enough where we don't just have to focus on the note. We're focusing on the performance.
Yeah.
Because the note is really the one thing that I can fix. I can't fix your tone. I can kind of tweak your timing. And with that, some attitude. And, you know, there's tricks with saturation and EQ and compression that you can kind of affect people's tone, but you can't with plugins or hardware make somebody sound sad or happy or pissed or something like that. And so I always will tell singers, young singers especially, like, and I learned this from doing some like movie and TV work, and seeing how prepared the actors were. But I compare singing to its voice acting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll tell a singer, like, imagine that the listener, that there's no track behind your vocal and they don't speak your language. So how are you going to convey the meaning of this song to them? They're not going to understand every word, but if it's a sad song, you got to make it painfully obvious in your voice that your heart is breaking in that moment.
Yeah.
You can't just sing about a heart being broken. You've got to make me feel it. And even with that, going back to pitch, like sometimes pitch is a part of that, not being right on or going to the note immediately. That's what helps convey some of these emotions. Sometimes going to the note immediately is the right call for that emotion. Like when you're talking about aggression and like up tempo and happy stuff, just kind of getting there. But if you're trying to make it sound a little sad or lonely or lazy, not being so quick to our notes, and not being so concerned with just hitting a note is what gets us there. But I just notice actors who are not professional singers a lot of times came in, I say they know their lines, so they know the lyrics, which is big. Like they don't use lyric sheets.
Mm-hmm.
Singers, and there's nothing wrong with using a lyric sheet. It especially helps for communication between an engineer, producer, and an artist, where we can say the second line of the chorus or things like that. So there's nothing wrong with using a lyric sheet, but they come in, they memorize the lyrics. They know their character and that they know the emotion of the song. They know if they're sad. They know if they're happy. They know if that changes. And they're also really good at taking direction. So even if they've prepared a character, usually you can be like, okay, let's do the character this way. And they are just there so quick. So I try to get a lot of like young singers and artists to focus on that. And just like, it's about the emotion. And sometimes we have to overdo it. And then just focus on the song as a whole. Cause I've had a lot of artists, like, especially in the mix process, they give us a reference of something. Like for instance, one artist gave the reference of Miranda Lambert, who I love, and her records are great. And specifically like the kind of like saturated vocals that Miranda does. And the singer, she's got an amazing voice, really rich and kind of goes down fairly low. And she just had a problem with the saturation kind of taking that lowness out of her voice and that richness in her bottom end.
Mm-hmm.
And so she wanted something, but then we ended up having to back that off because she was just so concerned with, in my opinion, the wrong thing. Who's to say if it's right or wrong? But me and the producer, this was just a record that or a single that I engineered and mixed. And the producer and I kind of agreed, yeah, it should be gritty, but I mean, you're battling with the artist. You want to make them happy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a case of, I feel like just focusing on the wrong things and not like, what is this song supposed to sound like?
Yeah.
Like you've got other songs where people can hear the richness in your voice. Like the richness doesn't have to be there every time.
Mm-hmm.
Like a guitar player doesn't have to melt your face every song.
Yeah.
Sometimes they can just play a note and it's just as powerful as the, the face melting solo that they did on the previous song. So
Right. Now you're like a pizza connoisseur, the Dave Portnoy of Nashville. Where's the best slice in Nashville?
unfortunately it just closed. My
Oh,
opinion, the best in Nashville is a place called Joey's House of Pizza.
okay.
They've had a couple different locations over the years, and his brother Manny owns a place downtown. It's just New York style. They're both New Yorkers. They used to be together, and then Joey, I don't think it's an argument or anything. I think he just wanted to do his own thing. He kind of split off and did his own thing. They're both great. I always thought Joey's was better, but they recently closed down. I think they're coming back. They're going to do something slightly different. Don't know what that is, but Nashville has some good pizza. I just ate at this is a national thing, but Emmy Square does Detroit style really well.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really found a good like Napolitano style place in town yet. There's some places that do it, but nothing that's blown me away yet. So.
Now, I close all my interviews asking, what's your advice to someone that wants to be in your shoes in a few years? Someone that wants to be maybe the head engineer of a studio or just kind of engineering sessions?
Man, I've got a lot of things to say about that. I guess just pretty trite, but it's just about hard work. Just knowing what you do, like personally, what your strengths are. And just working on those and excelling at those. I've always just tried to figure out what my competitive advantage has been, and it's changed over the years.
Yeah.
And just kind of lean into that and make sure that, like, one of the things I focus on now is just like tracking full bands and session management. And there used to be so many great engineers in town that did that well. And I feel like just with folks retiring, there's a lot fewer. And it's just about being fast and being good. And that's just practice. And I always talk about being invisible, especially on the engineering side. And so it's something I tell my interns. That's something I would tell my assistants, is our job is to be invisible. And that means a lot of different things. It just means, like, we keep our mouths shut, especially when you're new. Like if you're an intern or assistant, it's not that you don't know what you're doing or your opinion doesn't matter, but there's so much talent on the floor. Like if we're talking about a full band session, engineer, producer, and 4 to 7 musicians on the floor, that's a couple hundred years of experience. So you're a couple years of YouTube videos and working in your bedroom, while it's valuable, doesn't compare. So you just kind of stay quiet and stay attentive. And then the invisibility is also about just being prepared. Mm-hmm. So, not messing up. So again, going back to, you're good at what you do. So you can handle it competently. You can handle changes. Your DAW so well that when somebody asks you to do something, even if it's something that you don't do every single day, you've got a decent idea how to do it quickly. Because again, here in Nashville, we move very, very quickly. If you're talking 5 songs in 3 hours, just an insane pace. Records go slower than that, but and so knowing what you do, and then also being prepared. So knowing, like, well, we might have so many guitar overdubs, or we might do perk overdubs. So having those mics up, if they're different mics, having the channels ready in your DAW, or the ability to do it very quickly. And by quickly, I mean instantly. Like, you don't have time to create new tracks, name them, adjust input, output, press record. That's like way too much time. We could have already punched in half the song at that point. So yeah, it's just about hard work and that kind of idea of being invisible, and gives into the hard work. And early on, I always say you can't say no to anything.
Yeah.
You just have to say yes, and you kind of roll with the punches. And I do, like, if it's just something you can't do, like, this isn't the old Hollywood idea of just say yes and then learn later. I I don't believe in that, because people are putting their trust in you that you know what you're doing. So if it's really outside your wheelhouse, and that's something that happens in Nashville, a lot of my work comes from other engineers and producers, and I send work elsewhere. There's a lot of work for us. So it's like, you know what, I can technically do that, but you know who's really good at that kind of thing? You know, my buddy over here. So go talk to them, and it's always returned. So yeah, you just don't say no. So then you can get the experience and the clientele. I'm at a point in my career where I do say no, and I'm really trying to find specific types of clients to work with. So, but to get there, you got to do it all in the beginning, and you learn a lot from those clients.
Yeah.
Like some of the hardest clients I've learned, whether it's patience, whether it's keeping my mouth shut, whether it's just dealing with the worst vocal I've ever heard in my life, those kinds of things.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment, and check out my music on all streaming platforms at Justin McCormick. See you guys next time.